Hi students, welcome back to my channel Dr. Sakshi Arora Hans, Obs and Gynae. So you all know me as the author of the books Self-Assessment and Review of Gynecology. You know me through my lectures in Marrow, and the nursing students know me as Midwifery Madam, as I have given lectures on my YouTube channel in Hindi for nurses on this channel, Midwifery Madam. And you also know me, the nursing students also know me as the medical director for their app, Nursing Next app. Okay, so now today this video which I have made especially for the MCI students. Now the MCI students who are following the Marrow app. In Marrow, there is a topic, molar pregnancy, which I have dealt extensively because that topic, that video is basically meant for the students who are going to appear for their NEET exams or for DNB exam or for AIIMS exam. For MCI students, molar pregnancy, which I have recorded in Marrow, that's a little too vast for them. So the MCI students, you need to know molar pregnancy very concisely because very few questions are asked on molar pregnancy. But yes, if a question is asked, I do not want you to miss that out because molar pregnancy is a very theoretical topic. 1 + 1 is 2 in molar pregnancy always, right? So again, I'm saying this video is only and only for MCI students or for the FMGE students. Students who are going to appear for the NEET exam or for the AIIMS exam, if you want to know about molar pregnancy, download the Marrow app and subscribe to it. Clear? So let's begin molar pregnancy for the MCI students. So before I start telling you about the details of molar pregnancy, remember that molar pregnancy, it comes under gestational trophoblastic diseases. Right, so we have actually two categories. We have gestational trophoblastic diseases and we have gestational trophoblastic neoplasias. Right, in gestational trophoblastic diseases, you get H mole, high datiform mole, or what you say as a molar pregnancy. Right, so I want all of you to write this. Gestational trophoblastic diseases, that is H mole. Now H mole can be a partial mole or it can be a complete mole, right? And then we have gestational trophoblastic neoplasias. Now in gestational trophoblastic neoplasias, we have invasive mole, number 1. Number 2 category is choriocarcinoma. That's also a type of gestational trophoblastic neoplasia. Number 3 is placental site trophoblastic tumor, which in short is called as PSTT. And number 4 is epithelioid trophoblastic tumor, right? So gestational trophoblastic diseases includes H mole, and gestational trophoblastic neoplasias, they include these 4 categories, right? Now let's talk about H mole. Now, what is the basic problem in H mole? There are 2 problems which are happening in H mole. Number 1, in an H mole, there is abnormal proliferation of trophoblast at some places. So the trophoblast is madly proliferating at some places. And at some places, there is hydropic degeneration which is happening. So these are 2 things which are happening simultaneously in a molar pregnancy. On one side, there is trophoblastic proliferation, and on the other side, there is hydropic degeneration, right? So basically what happens in H mole is, in H mole, it is a benign disease of the trophoblast because the trophoblast is madly proliferating. So you can say it's a benign disease of the trophoblast which has malignant potential. So it can change into malignancy, but actually H mole is a benign disease of the trophoblast, right? Okay, now as I told you, what is happening in H mole is that in molar pregnancy, the trophoblast is madly proliferating. So if you remember the structure of a blastocyst, now in a blastocyst, on one side we have the inner cell mass, and on the other side, outside, it is lined by cells which are called as trophoblast. That is how the structure of a blastocyst is. Now what happens is that the inner cell mass of the blastocyst, it forms the entire fetus or the entire embryo. Whereas the trophoblast, this I'm telling you normally what happens. Whereas the trophoblast, it differentiates into cytotrophoblast and it differentiates into syncytiotrophoblast, right? So here on the slide, I have shown you that there is a blastocyst and you can see the green color is the inner cell mass and outer blue color single cell layer is the trophoblast, and it is the inner cell mass which gives rise to embryo. Now this trophoblast on day 8 after fertilization, this trophoblast, it divides into cytotrophoblast and into syncytiotrophoblast. Now cytotrophoblast, it performs 3 functions. Number 1, cytotrophoblast, it forms the fetal side of the placenta. Number 2, cytotrophoblast forms the fetal membrane chorion. All of you know that there are 2 fetal membranes, amnion and chorion. So it forms the fetal membrane chorion. And number 3, cytotrophoblast prevents PIH. Right? So these are the normal functions of cytotrophoblast. Whereas the normal function of syncytiotrophoblast is that it is the hormone factory of the placenta. All the hormones which are formed by placenta are actually formed by syncytiotrophoblast. So HCG is formed by syncytiotrophoblast. Human placental lactogen is formed by syncytiotrophoblast. So this was the normal thing. Now what is happening in molar pregnancy is that the trophoblast, this trophoblast over here is madly proliferating, right? Now if this trophoblast, if it gives some space for the inner cell mass to grow, then the inner cell mass will form some fetal parts, right? So in such a mole, what you are going to get is you will get madly proliferated trophoblast plus you will get some fetal parts. And this type of mole is called as a partial mole, right? On the other hand, imagine a situation where the trophoblast is madly proliferating and it is not giving any space to the inner cell mass to grow. Now, if the trophoblast is not giving any space to the inner cell mass to grow, what is going to happen? The inner cell mass will not grow, and because there won't be any inner cell mass, so there won't be any fetal tissue, right? So the entire uterus will be filled only with trophoblast and there will be no fetal part. And such a mole is called as a complete mole. Clear? So in a partial mole, along with the trophoblast, some fetal part is present. Whereas in a complete mole, along with the trophoblast, no fetal part is present. Right? Now, this is common sense that such type of pregnancy, it cannot continue up till term. Right? Such pregnancy has to end. Right? It's not a normal pregnancy and it definitely has to end. That is why the most common symptom or the most common presentation in a molar pregnancy is bleeding in first trimester. So patient is going to come to you with bleeding in first trimester. So much so that if a patient is vigilant enough, the patient is going to say that I saw grape-like vesicles coming out. Right? So some patients are going to give you this typical history that grape-like vesicles were coming out. And then you know instantly that this was a molar pregnancy. Right? So this is what is happening in a molar pregnancy. Now, because the trophoblast is madly proliferating, right? That is why the height of the uterus is more than the period of gestation. Right? So always in a molar pregnancy, the height will be more than the period of gestation. An exception I'll tell you later on. Right? Number 2, the uterus will be filled with grape-like vesicles, as I told you, and so patient will come to you with complaint of bleeding in first trimester, and some patients can typically give you the history of grape-like vesicles coming out. And these grape-like vesicles, this trophoblast which is present in the uterus, on ultrasound, it gives a snowstorm-like appearance. Very, very important. right? So what is happening is trophoblast is madly proliferating, right? So the height of the uterus is more than the period of gestation, number one. Number two, on ultrasound, you get a snowstorm like appearance. Number three, now for number three, I want you to come back here. Here I told you that syncytiotrophoblast is the hormone factory of the placenta, right? And when I say that trophoblast proliferates, it means cytotrophoblast is also proliferating and syncytiotrophoblast is also proliferating. Now, because syncytiotrophoblast is also madly proliferating, that is why all the hormones which are formed by syncytiotrophoblast will be increased. And so beta HCG levels, or you can simply say HCG levels in the patient will be increased, right? So that is the third thing which is happening in a molar pregnancy, that the levels of HCG are very, very high. Number four, again go back to this page. Here I told you that the function of cytotrophoblast is it prevents PIH. Now this trophoblast is madly proliferating. It is so busy in proliferation that it forgets that it has a function to perform, and that is to prevent PIH. So this trophoblast proliferates madly and it forgets that it has to prevent PIH. So the fourth thing which you get in a patient of molar pregnancy is that they have PIH, right? So here I have told you that there are four things which you are going to get in a patient of molar pregnancy. Number one, the height of the uterus will be more than the period of gestation. On ultrasound, you are going to get a snowstorm-like appearance. Her HCG levels will be very, very high, and she is going to have PIH, right? Now let's see what happens if HCG levels are high. Now, see, in pregnancy, all of us have seen in movies that whenever a patient becomes pregnant, they show that she starts vomiting, right? And vomiting of pregnancy is called as the morning sickness, right? Now, what happens is this morning sickness is basically because of hormone HCG. So, if HCG levels are very high, that leads to excessive vomiting. And excessive vomiting is called as hyperemesis gravidarum. So because the HCG levels are very high in a molar pregnancy, female will have excessive vomiting, and that is called as hyperemesis gravidarum, right? Number two, what happens is that the alpha subunit of HCG, it is similar to LH, it is similar to FSH, and it is similar to TSH, right? This all of us know that HCG has got two units, alpha subunit and beta subunit. It's the beta subunit which is the specific subunit, whereas alpha subunit of HCG is similar to LH, FSH and TSH. Now, because alpha subunit of HCG is similar to TSH, that is why patient will experience symptoms like thyrotoxicosis or thyroid storm, right? Number three, because alpha subunit of HCG is also similar to LH, that is why in patients of molar pregnancy, you get bilateral theca lutein cysts in the ovary. Now, by this much, most of your MCQs are solved, because most of the times what they do is that in their MCQ, they will say that there is a female who comes to you with complaint of bleeding in first trimester. On abdominal examination, the height of the uterus is more than the period of gestation on per vaginal examination or on abdominal examination, because ideally in first trimester, uterus should have been a pelvic organ. But in molar pregnancy, because the height of the uterus is more than the period of gestation, so you can palpate the uterus per abdominally, right? Then, They will further say that her beta HCG levels are very high, and when ultrasound was done, a snowstorm-like appearance was seen. So just now I'm going to show you how a snowstorm-like appearance looks like. And they will ask you to tell the diagnosis. So what is the diagnosis? The diagnosis is that the patient is a case of molar pregnancy. Either they will write molar pregnancy, or they will write hydatiform moles in the option, or they will write a vesicular mole in the option, right? Okay, now some other important one-liners which you have to remember here are, what is the most common cause of molar pregnancy? The most common cause of molar pregnancy is folic acid deficiency. Because folic acid deficiency is one of the most common causes of molar pregnancy, that is why molar pregnancy is common in developing countries. Third important point which you have to remember is that the risk of molar pregnancy is increased if a blood group A female, she marries a blood group O female, and the risk of molar pregnancy is more in females who are more than 40 years of age. Clear to you? So this was about basic about molar pregnancy, right? Now, as I told you, hydatiform mole, it can be of two types. It can be a partial mole or it can be a complete mole, right? Now, one difference I already told you between a partial mole and a complete mole, and that was in partial mole, fetal parts will be present. Some fetal parts will be present, whereas in complete mole, no fetal part is identified or no fetal part is present, right? Apart from that, the other difference between partial mole and a complete mole is that if you look at the chromosome number of a partial mole is triploid, right? And what do you mean by triploid? Triploid means that the chromosome number is 69XXY. Triploid means it is 69, and here the chromosome number is 69 and in brackets XXY, right? Now, how come it is triploid? It is triploid because a single ova is fertilized by two sperms. So you can see here in the image, I have shown a single ova being fertilized by two sperms. So the chromosome number of an ova will be 23. Of one sperm will be 23 and of the other sperm will be 23. So add all of them, and so the chromosome number comes out to be 69. And because here a single ova is being fertilized by two sperms, that is why it is called as dispermic. Clear? So in a partial mole, the chromosome number is triploid. It's 69. A single ova is fertilized by two sperms and it is dispermic. On the other hand, if you look at a complete mole, the chromosome number of a complete mole is 46. That means it is diploid. Now, what happens in a complete mole is that an empty ova is fertilized by a single sperm. So I know now you're going to ask me that, ma'am, if an empty ova is fertilized by a single sperm, so ova will have no chromosome number, 0, it's an empty. The chromosome number of a sperm is 23. So how come a complete mole becomes diploid? Now, how come a complete mole becomes diploid is because the chromosome number of the sperm, whatever genetic material sperm has, the entire genetic material duplicates, right? So a sperm has 23 chromosomes, all of them will duplicate, and that is how the chromosome number of a complete mole becomes 46. That is, it is diploid. This process is called as androgenesis, right? And because a complete mole is being fertilized, in a complete mole, the ova is being fertilized by a single sperm. That is why it is monospermic, right? So a partial mole is triploid, a complete mole is diploid. A partial mole is dispermic. Here the ova is fertilized by two sperms, whereas a complete mole is monospermic, right? Not only this, if you look at a partial mole, as I told you that in a partial mole, the chromosome number is 69 and the extra 23 chromosomes, they were coming from a sperm. That means in a partial mole, the extra genetic material belongs to the father, right? But if you look at a complete mole, in a complete mole, the entire genetic material belongs to the father because the ova was empty. Ova did not have any genetic material, right? So this was about the chromosome number and the differences between the partial mole and complete mole based on their genotype. Genotype is the genetic makeup. Now, apart from this, there are other differences between partial and complete mole. And in the beginning of the lecture, when I was talking about the clinical features or the symptoms which you get in molar pregnancy, remember all the clinical symptoms which I told you about molar pregnancy, that is hyperemesis gravidarum, thyrotoxicosis, theca lutein cyst, then PIH, all of them, they are more common in a complete mole than in a partial mole, right? So all symptoms of molar pregnancy, the hyperemesis gravidarum, thyrotoxicosis, theca lutein cyst, PIH, all of them are more common with a more common with a complete mole, and they are less common with a partial mole. Not only this, I told you in the beginning of the lecture that a molar pregnancy or an H mole is a benign disease of the trophoblast with malignant potential, right? So malignant potential is also more with a complete mole in comparison to a partial mole. So if they ask you chances of becoming malignant are more with a partial mole or they are more with complete mole, you are going to say that they are more with a complete mole, right? Then let's talk about ultrasound appearance. Again, in the beginning of the lecture, I told you that in molar pregnancy, you get a snowstorm-like appearance. So the typical features of molar pregnancy are seen with complete mole. So in a complete mole, you are going to get a snowstorm appearance on ultrasound. But if you look at a partial mole on ultrasound, its a picture resembles that of incomplete abortion, right? So all the typical things of a molar pregnancy which are discussed in the beginning, they will be seen with a complete mole, right? Again, one more typical thing which I told you there was, if we talk about the height of the uterus. Now, height of the uterus, I told you in the beginning of the lecture that in molar pregnancy, because the trophoblast is madly proliferating, so in a molar pregnancy, the height of the uterus is more than the period of gestation. So in a complete mole also, yes, the height of the uterus is always more than the period of gestation. But in a partial mole, the height of the uterus may be more than the period of gestation. It may be equal to the period of gestation, or it may be less than the period of gestation. Now I know you're going to ask me, ma'am, how is that possible that the height is less or height is equal to the period of gestation? This is possible because in the beginning, I told you that H mole, there are two problems happening. One is there is trophoblastic proliferation. The other is that there is hydropic degeneration. So in a partial mole, suppose if proliferation is happening more than degeneration, then the height of the uterus will be more than the period of the gestation. Suppose if proliferation and degeneration are happening at equal pace. In some places proliferation is happening, in some places degeneration is happening, and both of them are happening equally. In that case, the height of the uterus will remain equal to the period of gestation. Now, suppose in a partial mole, degeneration is happening more than proliferation. In that case, the height of the uterus will be less than the period of gestation. Whereas in case of complete mole, always and always proliferation is more, and that is why height of the uterus is always more than the period of gestation in a complete mole, right? So if they ask you 3 questions on investigation, that was the differences between partial mole and complete mole. Now, one more difference which I want you to add there is, before I tell you the investigations, is if we look at the levels of beta HCG. Now, the levels of beta HCG, so please write partial mole and a complete mole. Now, levels of beta HCG in a partial mole, they are increased. And when I say they are increased in comparison to a normal pregnancy. They are increased as compared to a normal pregnancy, but they are less than complete mole, right? So in a partial mole, yes, the levels of HCG are increased, but they are not that much increased as they would be in a complete mole. Whereas in the complete mole, the levels of HCG are very high. Most of the times they are more than 10 to the power of 5 international units per liter. Now, the unit of HCG, it can be 10 to the power of 5 international units per liter, or it can be said as 10 to the power of 5 milli international units per ml. Both of them are correct, right? So this is another difference between partial mole and complete mole. And the last thing which you have to remember about a partial mole and a complete mole is that in a complete mole, you will get bilateral theca lutein cysts. 100% they will be present. Whereas in a partial mole, the theca lutein cysts may be present or they may not be present in a partial mole, depending upon how high the HCG levels are, right? So this was about the differences between partial mole and complete mole. In the beginning of the lecture only, when we were talking about the difference in partial mole and complete mole, there I told you that the chances of malignancy are more with complete mole in comparison to partial mole. Clear? So I hope all the differences between partial mole and complete mole are clear to you, right? Now, let's talk about the investigations which are done in a molar pregnancy. Now, on investigations, there can be 3 questions which they can ask you. Number one question which they can ask you is, what is the investigation of choice in a molar pregnancy? So remember, the investigation of choice in a molar pregnancy is ultrasound or TVS. And I told you that on ultrasound or TVS, in a complete mole, you are going to get a snowstorm-like appearance. Whereas in a partial mole, you are going to get a picture like incomplete abortion, right? So now let's have a look at how does snowstorm appearance look like. As you remember that when we were drawing the trophoblast and it was madly proliferating, we had drawn an image something like this, right? You could see here that the trophoblast is madly proliferating. So there are grape-like vesicles filling the entire uterus. Similarly, when you will do an ultrasound, you will get same appearance, grape-like vesicles filling the entire uterus, right? This is what is called as the snowstorm appearance, right? Now, the second question which they can ask you on a molar pregnancy is that what is the gold standard investigation in a molar pregnancy? So the gold standard investigation in a molar pregnancy is histopathological examination. Now, when you do a histopathological examination in a partial mole, fetal parts will be present, whereas in a complete mole, fetal parts will be absent, right? And that is what is the difference between partial mole and complete mole, right? So that's the second question which they can ask you. A third question which they can ask you is, what is the investigation for follow-up of a molar pregnancy? So the investigation of choice for following up of molar pregnancy is beta HCG levels, right? So these are three questions which they can ask you on the diagnosis part or on the investigations part. Now let's talk about the management part. Now, obviously, a molar pregnancy cannot be taken up till term, and a molar pregnancy has to end and you have to evacuate it. So, if the patient's family is not complete, then the management of choice is suction evacuation. But if the family of the patient is complete, in that case, the management of choice is hysterectomy. Right? A very, very important question which is asked in DNB is that how do you manage the theca lutein cyst of a molar pregnancy? Remember, you do not do any treatment for a theca lutein cyst of a molar pregnancy. The theca lutein cyst will spontaneously regress after evacuation. So once you have evacuated the molar pregnancy, it will automatically regress. You don't have to do any special treatment for the theca lutein cysts. Clear? Now, again, I am telling you this, that a molar pregnancy has malignant potential. A molar pregnancy can become malignant and it can change into gestational trophoblastic neoplasia. And because a molar pregnancy can change into gestational trophoblastic neoplasia, that is why whether you are evacuating the molar pregnancy or whether you are doing hysterectomy, in both these cases, either of this, whatever you are doing, you will have to follow up the patient by using her beta HCG levels, right? So you are not going to say that because I have done hysterectomy, I'm not going to follow up the patient. No. Even if you have done hysterectomy, you have to follow up the patient by measuring her beta HCG levels, right? And so how do you do the follow-up in these cases? Now, in all patients of molar pregnancy, whether you did evacuation, whether you did hysterectomy, after you have done this, you are going to measure her beta HCG levels weekly, right? I'm going to measure her beta HCG levels weekly till I get 3 consecutive reports normal. Now, when I say that I get reports normal, what do I mean to say? See, normally a non-pregnant female doesn't have any HCG. HCG is not detected in her blood, right? So once you have evacuated the molar pregnancy or once you have done hysterectomy, you are going to check the levels of beta HCG in the patient weekly till you do not detect HCG levels, right? And they should remain undetected for 3 consecutive weeks. Once this happens, then you are going to measure beta HCG levels monthly and you are going to measure it for 6 months. Clear? So in total, I am following up the patient after a molar pregnancy for 6 months. In these 6 months, I do not want the patient to conceive, right? Pregnancy is contraindicated. Why so? Because suppose if patient conceives, now you all know that whenever the patient will conceive, her HCG levels will increase. And if her HCG levels will increase, I will not be able to know that her HCG has increased because of pregnancy or her HCG has increased because the molar pregnancy has changed into gestational trophoblastic neoplasia, right? That is why for 6 months after evacuating a molar pregnancy or after treating a molar pregnancy, pregnancy is contraindicated. That's a very, very important point. Another important point is in a partial mole, HCG levels will become normal after 7 weeks. That's a very important question. And after a complete mole evacuation, so once you have evacuated partial mole, beta HCG levels will come down to normal by 7 weeks. And once you have evacuated a complete mole, the HCG levels will come back to normal after 9 weeks. Clear? Now, the other very important thing is that when you are going to tell your patient that for 6 months you don't have to conceive, her next question will be, then ma'am, please tell me what is the best contraceptive to take to avoid pregnancy. Now, after H mole evacuation, the contraceptive of choice is oral contraceptive pills, right? So that's a very, very important question, not only clinically, but theoretically, it's very, very important because it's asked in your exams that what's the best contraceptive after H mole evacuation? And remember, that is oral contraceptive pills, the OCPs. Clear? So now, again, I'm telling you the same thing, that a molar pregnancy, that is H mole, that's a benign disease of the trophoblast, but it has malignant potential, right? So it has chances of becoming gestational trophoblastic neoplasia, right? So how can you prevent a molar pregnancy? Even after being evacuated, even after doing hysterectomy, there are chances of getting converted into gestational trophoblastic neoplasia. So how can you prevent gestational trophoblastic neoplasias in a molar pregnancy patient? There are 2 ways by which you can do that. Number 1 is by monitoring the beta HCG levels. Now, if beta HCG levels increase or if beta HCG levels do not decrease, right, in either of these 2 situations, after H mole evacuation, at any point of time, if beta HCG levels increase while you are doing the follow-up or they do not decrease, both these things indicate that there are increased chances of neoplasia, right? And number 2 is that if you want to prevent neoplasia, the best thing is you should give prophylactic chemotherapy, right? So the best way of preventing is that you go for prophylactic chemotherapy. Do a follow-up and then give prophylactic chemotherapy. Now, a word of caution here. Prophylactic chemotherapy is not, please remember, it's not given to all patients of H mole. It means that all patients who are H mole patients, after evacuating H mole, you are not going to give each and every patient of a molar pregnancy prophylactic chemotherapy. That's not recommended. You are not going to do that. You have to give prophylactic chemotherapy only if it is indicated, right? So now you know what I'm going to come to next, that what are the indications for giving prophylactic chemotherapy after H mole. Now, the indications for giving prophylactic chemotherapy after H mole, that you can remember by the mnemonic HAT, where H stands for HCG levels. So there are 2 conditions of HCG when you have to give prophylactic chemotherapy. Number 1, if HCG levels are increasing or if they are not decreasing during follow-up, right? And number 2, if at any point of time during follow-up the levels of HCG are more than equal to 10 to the power of 5 international units per liter, in that case also you have to give prophylactic chemotherapy, right? Then comes A. A stands for age of the patient. If age of the patient is more than equal to 40 years, then you have to give prophylactic chemotherapy. And then T. T stands for theca lutein cyst. If the size of the theca lutein cyst is more than equal to 6 centimeters, in that case you have to give prophylactic chemotherapy, right? So these are the 4 indications and they should be on your tips for giving prophylactic chemotherapy after H mole evacuation, right? Then next thing is that what is the drug of choice for prophylactic chemotherapy? The drug of choice for prophylactic chemotherapy is methotrexate. Clear? Now, as I told you that an H mole can become malignant, and if it becomes malignant, either it can change into invasive mole or it can change into choriocarcinoma. These are the two gestational trophoblastic neoplasias into which an H mole generally changes, right? Now, the difference between invasive mole and choriocarcinoma is that on histopathological examination, in invasive mole, villi will be present, whereas in choriocarcinoma, villi will be absent. That's one difference between invasive mole and choriocarcinoma. So on histopathological examination, in an invasive mole, villi will be present, but in choriocarcinoma, villi would be absent. Number two difference between them is that invasive mole, always it has to be managed surgically. You have to do hysterectomy in case of invasive mole. Whereas a choriocarcinoma is a very chemosensitive tumor, right? So the management of choice for a choriocarcinoma is always chemotherapy. Clear? Now, suppose they ask you which is the most common gestational trophoblastic neoplasia. Now, if the question is most common gestational trophoblastic neoplasia, your answer should be invasive mole, right? If the question says which is the most common gestational trophoblastic neoplasia after molar pregnancy, so after molar pregnancy, the most common gestational trophoblastic neoplasia is invasive mole. Please do not say that it is choriocarcinoma. After molar pregnancy, the most common gestational trophoblastic neoplasia is invasive mole. What you have to understand is gestational trophoblastic neoplasias, they occur not only after molar pregnancy, they can occur after full-term pregnancy and they can happen after abortion also. So it is not this that a gestational trophoblastic neoplasia can happen only after molar pregnancy, right? So suppose if question says what is the most common gestational trophoblastic neoplasia after full-term pregnancy? Now your answer changes and it becomes choriocarcinoma. So after molar pregnancy, the most common GTN is invasive mole, and after full-term pregnancy, the most common GTN is choriocarcinoma. Overall, the most common GTN is invasive mole. But overall, if they ask you which is the most dangerous GTN, the most dangerous GTN is choriocarcinoma. Whether they say most dangerous GTN overall or whether they say most dangerous GTN after molar pregnancy, in both the cases, the answer is choriocarcinoma. Clear? So I hope I've made my points clear to all of you. So I hope you've understood molar pregnancy, and if that is the case, then please don't forget to like and to share this video with your friends. Choriocarcinoma and gestational trophoblastic neoplasia I'll be covering in a different video, and for that you will have to subscribe to my channel and you will have to press the bell button so that the notification comes to you. In the meanwhile, keep practicing questions and keep studying, keep safe. Thank you. Bye.